Hello, and welcome to a brief overview of the Dutch Golden Age. In this video, we'll look at a few different things. We'll look at the Dutch Republic and the oligarchy that develops, what's going on with the Dutch economy and the Dutch East India Company, how does that improve life in the Netherlands, and then kind of like how does it also promote art and the eventual decline of the Dutch Golden Age. First, we're going to examine the Dutch Republic that develops. Now, the Dutch Republic is going to be formed right after their fight for independence from Spain with King Philip II, who we've talked about in previous videos. And the Union of Utrecht created an alliance of independent provinces that had won their independence from Spain. And that's kind of what develops out of that. And the establishment of the Republic made the Netherlands the only such government in Europe at this time. And while they don't necessarily have like one succinct monarch like in other parts of Europe, they do develop a new kind of government. And specifically, they're going to develop an oligarchy. Each of the seven individual provinces elected a stadtholder or a provincial leader. And those representatives are going to form what's called the Estates General or the legislative body. That kind of makes decisions. They control the military, the foreign policy, they look at taxes. And this is considered an oligarchy because these rulers, they're made up of wealthy elites who are really only promoting their own self-interest. And it's going to be, even though they elect these leaders, they're kind of the same families every time. And this is going to help trade take off as it's because it's benefiting both wealthy landowners and those urban merchants. And those are the people that are part of the ones making decisions. And here's a graphic for you of how it all kind of breaks down. So it starts with the regions at the provincial level, goes to the stadtholder, and then to the states general, who is able to kind of like make all the decisions. Which then leads us to one of the most important parts of the Dutch Golden Age, which is the Dutch economy. Now, the Dutch already had well established businesses at this point in time. They had thriving fish farms and textile industries, and they had a trade route that's reached all the way to East Asia. And this is all really developed and established by the Dutch East India Company, or VOC, or kind of their acronym. And through that, they're going to export diamonds, linens, pottery, tulips, all these different luxury items. And the Great Dutch Land Reclamation Project was accelerated during this time as well, where they're trying to keep their land from kind of disintegrating into the sea. So they do all this different kind of like interactions with their environment to try to build up seawalls to make sure their land's not eroding. But let's take a minute to talk a little bit more about the Dutch East India Company and the effects that company has on the Dutch and the rest of the world. Now, the Dutch East India Company is a joint stock company, which means that there are many different people that are investing in and financing this company, and then they get profits back based on the sales of the goods. How it runs, it's managed by a board of directors where they collect money from all the different investors, and it allowed them to raise enough money to venture all over the world. They're going to see extreme profit and benefit from this. I think the first voyage that they took, they came back with 60% um, revenue based on what they put in, like 1 to 60. And the profits that they're getting from going directly to the source to trade is making Amsterdam one of the richest cities in the world. And it's also going to help increase the standard of living for nearly everybody living in the Netherlands during this time. And because they would gain so much money and profit from each trip, they were able to offer really low shipping rates to other countries. So it made them the masters of carrying trade, which just means that merchants from other nations would use their ships to import and export goods, kind of like a mail service system in a way. And the Dutch East India Company, it's considered the first multinational corporation in the world as it employed people from Europe, Asia, and the Americas to make this whole process successful. And their monopoly on trade, especially in the East Indies, made them one of the wealthiest corporations of all time. Like it estimates that they would be worth over $7 trillion in today's money. One of the big negative impacts, though, that we'll definitely be talking about again later, is how the Dutch East India Company kind of set the mold for imperialization. Specifically, where they're imperializing in Java, which is modern day Indonesia, it became the blueprint for other European nations to follow later on when they take over parts of Africa and Asia. The company buys land and then farms those raw materials while using natives to perform labor and low wages. And that kind of like coercive labor system is exactly what other Europeans will use later on. Next, we're going to look at what life was like in the Netherlands because they were seeing all of this money and all the success. Because they're so focused on trade, they're going to be kind of willing to be a lot more accepting than other places in Europe during this time because they see the bottom line as the most important, not your religious affiliation. So they're actually going to be much more religiously tolerant during this time than most of the rest of Europe. Like, for example, Jewish people were free to worship in synagogues and had more rights than other parts of Europe during this time. And their thriving economy is going to lead to an increased standard of living. So you'll see lots of artists and philosophers are going to move to Amsterdam, and you're going to see a lot of art that's focused on religious themes and everyday life. Remember, anytime you see the term golden age, it usually implies that you've got a thriving economy, you've got thriving art and culture, and you can really only have thriving art and culture if you have political stability and you've got the money to support the arts. So we'll see lots of people are going to be attracted to this idea that the Netherlands offers this higher standard of living. So you get a lot of people moving there, and it gives it rise to this idea of a Protestant work ethic. Just the fact that the Protestants are the ones that are making money during this time and are thriving successfully in that area. We also see, because of this increased tolerance movement, that women are going to be able to be more visible outside their homes during this time period. And in the workforce, they're going to work for higher wages than most of the rest of Europe. And the rising of the middle class is going to be pretty prevalent in the Netherlands because of the merchant class kind of leading the way and opening the door. So the middle class rises during this time period too. So you might be thinking, wow, this all sounds really great. How would it ever come to an end? Well, let me tell you, it eventually does. All good things come to an end. There's not just one thing that marks the decline. It's kind of like several things crippling them over time. The first is that they don't have a strong leader after William III's death in 1702. And so, with that lack of leadership comes a lot of areas for them to grow weaker in. One of the things that also hurts them is that the British Royal Navy becomes the supreme naval force in Europe after this time. Their technology is better, their numbers are better. And then we see fishing and trade industries start declining for them during this time. And remember, that's their main source of income. And then we've got tulip mania. So pretty much in the early 1600s, tulips were really in vogue around Europe and they were seen as a status symbol. So the Dutch are really the main producers of tulip bulbs and they were sending these tulip bulbs all over Europe for these exorbitant prices. And what ends up happening is that the trend kind of goes away and all of these different people had invested in tulip fields because the profit was so high. And it's one of the first examples we have of like a market bubble bursting, and the people who had invested all their money in these tulip fields lost all their money. So all of these things over time really cripple them financially and politically. And really the only thing kind of keeping them in, any kind of significance is the fact that they still have really strong financial institutions. Now, a big part of any golden age, of course, is the development of art and culture, and that's also true for the Dutch. We see lots of examples of art from this time period that are really going to be very famous across Europe. Dutch Golden Age art will really move away from traditional religious subjects and towards more secular themes, including portraits of ordinary people, landscapes, still lifes, and genre scenes depicting everyday life. They really wanted everything to look much more realistic than previous, art themes did. Their goal was to capture the essence of what Dutch life looked like, and I think that they were successful in that. And that's all we've got for today. Thanks for watching.